The velvet box hit the table so softly it didn't even make a sound, but her face made up for all of it. She froze, mid-laugh, wine glass still tilted toward her lips, her fingers clenched around the stem like she was holding onto the lie itself. The man across from her, dark blazer, sharp jawline, perfectly relaxed posture, glanced down at the box, then looked up at me with an expression that was far too calm for someone who just got caught. No one said a word. Not her. Not him. Not me. She blinked like she hadn't decided whether to scream or pretend this was a joke. But I was already pulling out the chair. I sat down. I didn't ask. For 3 seconds, the table was silent, an empty war zone before the smoke rises. Then I pushed the box across the polished wood with one finger. "You forgot this," I said quietly, eyes on her, not him. Her mouth opened. Nothing. The man across from her leaned forward and said, as if we were negotiating a lease, "Is this how you wanted to do it?" I didn't answer him. I never looked at him. I only had one goal, one message, and I made sure she heard it. "You know," I said softly, "you never once looked me in the eyes this week. Not once. Even when you lied about going to your sister's. Even when you said you were tired. Even when you kissed me goodbye." Her face turned a sick shade of white. I watched her breathing change. Her hand trembled near the wine glass. "You said you'd be at the spa today," I added. "But I tracked your car. You parked here 2 hours ago. I even waited 30 minutes across the street just to be sure." Still no answer. So I opened the box for her. The ring inside wasn't mine. It was hers. Her wedding ring. The one I'd taken off her nightstand drawer this morning, because she hadn't worn it in 3 weeks. And underneath the ring? A folded photo. A printed screenshot, actually. From a security camera in a hotel lobby. Her and him. Last Friday. Arms around each other like they were the married ones. Her lover didn't even blink. I think he already knew. He didn't flinch. Didn't apologize. Just watched me like he was studying a lab rat. But she looked like she was falling through the floor. "You wanted to start your new life," I said, standing slowly, "so I figured I'd give you a little nudge." And that's when the waiter showed up. He placed a bill on the table. But it wasn't for their table. It was for a private dinner, fully prepaid, under my name. And under the receipt was another envelope. One I had personally handed to the maitre d' before coming in. I looked down at her one last time and said, "You'll want to read that before dessert." Then I walked out. And I never looked back. But what she found inside that envelope, that's the part no one at that restaurant will ever forget. It took her 17 seconds to tear open the envelope after I walked out. Yes, I watched through the tinted window of my parked car across the street. Call it closure. Call it punishment. Or maybe I just wanted to see what truth did to someone who lied with a straight face for months. She read the first page once. Then again. And that's when the shaking started. The man she was with leaned in to peek. And the second he did, he stood up from the table so fast his chair nearly tipped. He said something, I couldn't hear what, but it made her grab his sleeve like she was begging. He pulled away and looked around, realizing the quiet hum of the restaurant had turned to whispering. Then, he walked out on her. Just like that. I didn't move. I just watched her collapse into the seat like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. She clutched the envelope like it had burned her fingers. And in a way, it had. Inside the envelope were 5 things. First, a copy of her full chat logs with him, printed from her own iCloud backup. Every emoji, every disgusting detail, every time she texted him after I'd kissed her goodnight. I'd used software meant for parents to monitor their teenagers. It worked just fine for monitoring a cheating wife, too. Second, a signed letter from my lawyer, stating the divorce papers had been filed that morning and served to her workplace 10 minutes before dinner. She'd be reading them right after dessert, if she even made it back to the office. Third, a small, neat invoice. Her credit card statement showing $8,432 in lingerie, hotel charges, and Uber rides, all disputed. All flagged. All legally documented. I wasn't paying for a single cent of her affair expenses. The petty part of me smiled when I saw the lingerie store return receipt paperclip next to it. Fourth, a check. A real one. Payable to her mother. For the exact amount she borrowed from her last year behind my back. I paid it off, not for her, but so I could call her mom later that night and explain why. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. And fifth, and this is the one that shattered her more than anything else, a printed selfie. Not mine. Theirs. Her and her lover, half-dressed in a hotel mirror. The one she thought was deleted forever. The one she stupidly uploaded to her cloud for 5 minutes before realizing and removing it. But not before I backed it up and emailed it to someone. The someone? Her boss. And yes, I CC'd HR. Because it turns out, the man she was having drinks with that night wasn't just her lover, he was also her client, and that was a direct violation of her firm's code of conduct. The bonus she was bragging about a week earlier? Poof. Gone. Along with her six-figure career track and her chance at a partner position. As she sat alone at the table, I saw her lift her phone and call someone. She pressed it to her ear, lips trembling. She didn't know it yet, but I'd already deactivated her line. The message would say the number was no longer in service. I finally started the car. Not fast, not triumphant, but with the quiet understanding that I hadn't just left her, I'd erased myself from the very version of life she thought she controlled. And as I pulled away, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. A single text. You don't understand what you've done. But oh, I did. And the real horror? I hadn't even revealed the worst part yet. Not to her. Not to him. Not to anyone. That was still coming. I didn't plan to go back. I really didn't. After driving away from that restaurant, I told myself it was over. That I had finally drawn the line. That I'd done what so many people only fantasize about doing in their darkest, loneliest hours. I'd exposed her. I'd walked out. And she was left to sit there with nothing but the receipts, her ruined future, and the silence that comes when you realize nobody's coming to save you. But the truth is, closure isn't that simple. Because 25 minutes after leaving, I found myself parked 2 blocks away from the restaurant, engine off, staring at the sidewalk like some ghost was going to give me directions. Something didn't feel done. Something about her reaction. About his reaction. The way he walked out so quickly, like this whole thing was rehearsed. Then I noticed someone watching me. She was standing on the opposite side of the street, about half a block down, wearing a green scarf, holding a cigarette that she wasn't even smoking. Just watching. I'd seen her before. 2 nights ago. She had walked out of a building I recognized, the apartment Dana's Pilates instructor friend supposedly lived in. Back then, I thought she might have just been a neighbor. But now? Now I wasn't so sure. She started walking toward me. Slowly. Like she wasn't in a rush. Like she had all the time in the world to ruin mine. When she got close, she tapped on the driver's side window. I cracked it an inch. "You Nolan?" she asked, voice calm, flat, like this was just another Tuesday. I didn't answer. "I'm the sister," she said, "of the guy your wife was with. Alex." Now I looked at her properly. Same sharp nose. Same stone-cold eyes. Except hers didn't flinch. "I tried to warn you last year," she said, pulling out a phone and showing me a message. It was an old DM, sent to my Instagram inbox. One I had never seen. "I don't know you, but your wife is meeting with someone dangerous. You deserve to know." Sent 8 months ago. I must have ignored it. Or assumed it was spam. I never replied. She gave me a bitter smile. "You blocked me. Guess you thought I was a scammer." I felt a chill crawl down my arms. "I wasn't trying to ruin your marriage," she said. "But I was trying to save his." And that's when the hammer dropped. She told me Alex, Dana's lover, wasn't just cheating on someone. He wasn't just wrecking lives for fun. He was being paid to do it. There was a whole side hustle. Rich, bored men would pay him to seduce the wives of their enemies. CEOs. Lawyers. Politicians. Then they'd use the evidence to blow up careers, reputations, custody battles. A professional homewrecker for hire. And Dana? She wasn't the first. She was maybe the 6th. But she wasn't supposed to fall in love, the sister said. That wasn't part of the script. My brain locked up for a second. This wasn't an affair anymore. This was a setup, like something out of a movie. A guy hired to destroy other people's lives, and my wife had willingly walked into the trap. Only now, she didn't know she was also a mark. I asked one question. Quietly. Who hired him? Her answer? I don't know. But I know where to look. And that's how I ended up in her apartment an hour later. Surrounded by files, burner phone screenshots, printouts of chat logs with initials instead of names. She showed me a list. My name was on it. Next to a dollar figure. 10,000. That's what I was worth to someone. 10 grand to destroy me. That was the night I realized I hadn't just lost a wife. I was in the middle of something far uglier than betrayal. And Dana? She was still just getting started. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, though I was. Not because I was heartbroken. Though yeah, that too. No, the real reason I stayed up was because somewhere, out there in the same city, someone had paid 10 grand to destroy me. Not my marriage. Me. My name. My career. My sanity. and I still had no idea who. The sister, her name was Fallon, slept on the couch, fully dressed, with a baseball bat leaning against her radiator. I sat at her kitchen table staring at the list. Names, payment dates, some real, some with aliases. But next to mine, there was only a single clue, C+S. That could have meant 100 things. A name, a company, a couple. I started thinking back through every person in my life. Coworkers, friends, exes, anyone who might hold a grudge. But nothing made sense. I'd never been the kind of guy to inspire revenge. I was forgettable, quiet, a nice guy, according to literally every woman who ever dumped me. And now suddenly I was the target of something so coordinated, so elaborate, it made my knees shake every time I tried to stand. At 6:42 a.m., Fallon got a text. She picked it up, went pale, then showed me the screen without a word. It was a blurry street photo, taken just outside her building. In the bottom left corner, you could clearly see me sitting by her kitchen window. The message had no text, no number, just the image. We didn't even have time to react before her apartment buzzer rang. Twice. She pulled me away from the window. I ducked. She killed the lights. I heard the squeal of tires outside, and by the time we cracked the door open 2 minutes later, the street was empty again. Except for one thing. A key, stuck in her mailbox slot. And tied to the key with red string was a folded note. It had one word on it. Checkmate. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just some digital attack or workplace setup. Someone was watching us in real time, playing moves like it was a game, and I wasn't just losing. I had never even known I was on the board. Fallon grabbed her keys, and we left. I didn't argue. We drove for miles in silence, weaving through parts of the city I didn't recognize. Eventually, we pulled into an old parking garage near the waterfront. Industrial. Empty. Smelled like oil and rain. She parked in a shadowed corner and opened her glove box. Inside, a cheap prepaid phone, a flash drive, and a small black binder with printed photos. Surveillance shots. Of me. In my backyard. In my office lobby. In a gas station 2 weeks ago buying Gatorade. Fallon looked at me, dead serious. They've been tracking you for months. I wanted to throw up, but I also wanted to know how deep it went. So she plugged in the flash drive to her tablet, opened the only folder inside, and played a video. It was footage from a hotel hallway. The same hotel Dana and Alex had met in, again and again. But in this clip, she wasn't with Alex. She was standing outside a door, alone, talking on the phone, and then a man opened the door. Not Alex. Not anyone I recognized. Gray beard, black gloves, big, military posture. He handed Dana an envelope. She nodded, took it, and kissed him on the cheek before walking away. The date stamp on the video? 2 weeks before she ever met Alex. That's when it hit me like a slap. The affair wasn't the betrayal. It was the distraction. Whatever was inside that envelope. That was the real deal. I turned to Fallon and said the words I hadn't dared to say until now. This goes beyond her, doesn't it? She didn't nod. She didn't answer. She just handed me the burner phone. It had one message on it. From an unknown contact. Nolan, if you want answers, meet me tonight. Alone. Dock 8. 11 p.m. And that's when Fallon grabbed my wrist, squeezed it hard, and whispered like someone already bracing for the worst. Do not go there. But of course I would. Because I already knew something she didn't. Dana had once lied to me about a yoga retreat at Dock 8. I didn't tell Fallon I was going. She had fallen asleep again, this time with her back against the front door and a chair wedged beneath the knob like she was prepping for a siege. I waited until 10:15 p.m., grabbed the burner phone, the hotel photo still fresh in my mind, and left through the fire escape with my breath frozen in my chest. The city looked different that night. Not just darker, but tighter. Like it had closed in around me without me noticing. Every parked car felt suspicious. Every passing stranger felt too aware. By the time I reached Dock 8, I was convinced half the shadows were watching me breathe. It was nearly abandoned. Rows of corrugated storage units lined the fenced-off concrete, the river licking the shore below like it was hungry for something. I found Dock 8 near the edge, its gate rusted half open, the floodlights buzzing faintly overhead like dying insects. And then I saw him, standing beneath one of the lights, coat collar up, hands in his pockets. He wasn't moving. He didn't wave. He didn't look surprised to see me. He just waited. I kept walking until we were 10 feet apart. And I was the one who broke the silence. You're the one from the hotel video. He tilted his head slightly, like he was impressed. You've been busy, he said. Voice low. Not threatening. Just clean. Practiced. Who the hell are you? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. No words. Just handed it to me like it was a pizza delivery and stepped back. I opened it. Inside were photos. Of me. Not new ones. Old ones. Childhood. College. Me in a hospital bed after my car accident sophomore year. Me standing at a funeral I barely remembered. Me outside a courthouse holding paperwork I'd never shared with anyone. Then came the one that stopped my heart. It was a photo of my father. Except, my father died when I was 11. In a boating accident. No body ever recovered. No funeral. Just a closed casket and a whole lifetime of unanswered questions. But the man in this photo wasn't 11 years dead. He was alive. Standing next to Dana. Smiling. My knees nearly gave out. What is this? I whispered, not even to him. Just to the air. He finally spoke. Everything you thought was yours, your wife, your job, your story, all of it was constructed. I looked up at him. Constructed by who? That's when he smiled. Not wide. Just enough to say, you're not ready. Then he leaned forward slightly and said, your father's not who you think he was. And neither is your wife. I wanted to scream. To hit him. But he stepped back into the dark before I moved an inch. And from the shadows behind him, a car engine hummed awake. A silver SUV with tinted windows rolled forward. The license plate? Covered. The windows? Black. It passed within inches of me and stopped just long enough for the passenger window to roll down halfway. Dana was inside. Eyes red. Face blank. She didn't speak. She just held up her hand. Her wedding ring was gone. And in its place, she wore a silver band with a carved emblem I didn't recognize. Then the window slid shut. The SUV turned. And they disappeared into the night. I was left standing there, holding a folder that told me my father might still be alive. That Dana was part of something I couldn't even name. That none of my memories could be trusted. And the worst part? The very last page in the folder wasn't a photo. It was a list. Of names. Mine was third. The first two were crossed out. I stared at the list for what felt like an hour. 8 names. 2 crossed out. Mine was third. The others, some I recognized vaguely. Others meant nothing to me. But one stood out near the bottom, Fallon Shore. I gripped the folder tighter, as if I could will it to explain itself. But no, it just sat there like an accusation without a voice. My head pounded, and everything. The SUV, Dana, the silver ring, the man's words, started folding into one unbearable pressure behind my eyes. I don't even remember walking back to the street. I remember ending up in a motel room, hours later, after paying cash at the front desk and checking in under the name I hadn't used since college, Ethan Clark. I locked the door, closed the curtains, and sat on the floor with my back against the mini fridge. And I started reading every single name on that list. One by one. Googling. Searching social media. Court records. Death notices. The first 2, crossed out, had both died within a year of each other. One in a house fire. One fell from a balcony in what was ruled a sleepwalking accident. Both had been involved in whistleblower cases. Both had vanished from public attention months before their deaths. Both had wives who quietly disappeared after the funerals. I felt sick. The 4th name was a defense contractor. The 5th, someone who ran a hedge fund later investigated for money laundering. The 6th, a journalist who'd suddenly gone off the grid 6 months ago after publishing a series of articles on classified military programs. So what was I doing on that list? What had I done? The worst part was, I didn't know. I couldn't think of a single thing I'd been involved in that mattered enough to land me on a list with those kinds of people. I'd never been political, never exposed anything, never even filed a police report in my adult life. And yet someone had decided my life needed to be dismantled, one piece at a time. That's when I realized I needed Fallon more than ever. I powered up the burner phone again, ignoring the growing sense of dread that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been helping me out of kindness. Maybe she was just the next chess piece. But I had to know. I had no one else. I called her. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. Then I sent a single text. You're on the list too. Tell me what you know. A few minutes later, she replied. Meet me where the power went out. 2 a.m. I had no idea what she meant until I remembered. 3 weeks ago, our neighborhood had a blackout. One street only. The result of a transformer failure. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time, but Fallon had mentioned it in passing that same week, saying it had messed with her security system. I thought she was just venting, but now I realized that blackout was targeted. A test run. A dry rehearsal. And both of our addresses were on that block. I arrived at the spot early, hiding across the street in a construction site overlooking the substation. Fallon showed up right at 2 o'clock, her car's headlights off, her hood pulled low. She didn't see me until I stepped into the open. When she did, she looked terrified. Not of me, but of what I might ask. You lied to me, I said, louder than I intended. She didn't deny it. You knew Dana was involved before I ever showed you that photo, I said. You knew my name was on that list. And you knew about my father. She finally looked up, eyes glassy. Because he paid me to watch you, she said. I staggered back. What? She nodded. 3 months ago. I was broke. Fired. I needed cash. And he said all I had to do was keep an eye on you. No interaction. Just location check-ins. That was it. Why me? She hesitated. Because your father knew you were asking the wrong questions, she said. About your mother. That hit harder than anything yet. My mother died in a car crash when I was a kid. Fallon looked at me like I was a stranger, she pitted. Your mother didn't die, she whispered. She disappeared. The body was never confirmed. And your father, he's been trying to find her ever since. But not to bring her home. She pulled out a second folder. Smaller. Thinner. Inside was a photo. Black and white. Grainy. A woman in handcuffs, being escorted through a military hangar. Eyes covered. Wrist branded with the same symbol that Dana's silver ring bore. Fallon whispered the words that would keep me awake for the rest of my life. Your mother didn't die in a car crash, Nolan. She defected. For a full minute, I didn't speak. The word defected just sat there in the air like a corpse in a clean room. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, even my own personality, it started to feel synthetic. Like someone had engineered the person I believed I was. And now Fallon was telling me that the biggest truth of all, my mother's death, was a lie. I looked down at the photo again. That wasn't just a woman in cuffs. That was my mother. The woman whose funeral I had cried through, whose car crash I'd tried to visualize over and over as a child, just to make sense of the way she vanished from my life. But here she was, alive, restrained, dragged through a military airfield with her wrists bound and a symbol burned into her skin that matched the ring Dana now wore. Fallon sat on the hood of her car, staring out into the dark like she didn't even want to look at me anymore. You need to understand something, she said, her voice lower now, like she wasn't even sure she should be speaking. Your father was part of a program that doesn't officially exist. Neither was your mother. But she didn't defect in the way we think of it. It wasn't politics. It was knowledge. I asked the obvious question. What knowledge? She hesitated, then pulled out a flash drive. I only saw part of this, she said, because it scared me. I took the drive, shoved it into the burner laptop I'd brought from the motel, and opened the only file inside. It was video surveillance. Not from this year. Not even this decade. 1998. A long, narrow room. Clinical. Lined with filing cabinets and overhead lights that flickered every few seconds. A man in a lab coat stood over a woman strapped to a gurney. She looked delirious, sweating, thrashing. That woman was my mother. The audio was grainy, but clear enough. We need to suppress memory sequence 3B, the man said. But what if it fractures the host? Someone off camera asked. Then he never wakes up, the man said. And he never asks the wrong questions. The video paused. I looked up at Fallon. What the hell is this? She swallowed hard. It's a partial record of a program that ran in the late 90s. They called it MEMBRIC, Memory Isolation Architecture. The theory was, if you could suppress a specific memory chain in a child, you could reroute the emotional development, program the personality, repress entire instincts. I stared at her. She didn't blink. You were the test subject, Nolan. I almost laughed. That's insane. But then she showed me the final image. A birth certificate. Mine. Same name. Same birth date. But it had been filed twice in 2 different states. Once in Oregon. Once in Arizona. Same hospital name. Different medical ID numbers. Different attending physicians. One marked void. The other labeled archived. I stepped back from her like she was holding something radioactive. You're telling me I'm some kind of experiment? No, she said. I'm telling you they tried to make you forget. And it didn't work. And that's when I remembered. The dreams. The flashes. The migraines that started when I was 12. The blank spots in my memory. The recurring dream I'd had for years where I was trapped inside a glass tunnel under flickering lights, watching a woman scream behind soundproof walls. I thought it was just childhood trauma. But what if it wasn't? What if the dream was a memory? What does this have to do with Dana? I asked, my voice barely audible. Fallon sighed, stood up, and handed me a second flash drive. She was never your wife, she said. And the world cracked open. She was your monitor. Assigned to you after your father dropped off the radar. Her job wasn't to marry you. It was to track your triggers. To see what unlocked the buried programming. I dropped the drive. You're lying. No. I'm the last person telling you the truth. Then why are you helping me? She didn't answer. She just looked over her shoulder at the road behind us, like she was listening for a sound that hadn't happened yet. Then she leaned close and whispered something so quiet, I barely heard it. Because I failed. Once. And I'm not going to fail again. I stared at her. What do you mean I failed, who? And then she pulled up her sleeve. Tattooed on her wrist, faded and crude, was the same emblem from Dana's silver ring. Except hers was slashed through. Scarred. She had once been part of them too. And she had gotten out. We didn't drive back to the motel. We drove west, straight toward the state line, through mountain roads no GPS could properly track, guided only by a map Fallon had printed and marked with strange blue XS. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. Something in my gut had shifted, like a fog had lifted, and I was finally walking through my own life with my eyes open. Fallon said we had one last stop. A facility long shut down, buried near a dried-out reservoir. Government-owned but off the books. She called it Site 5. The trip took hours. We drove mostly in silence. But every once in a while, I'd glance at her and wonder if she was really on my side, or just the last chapter of the illusion. We reached it just before dawn. A rusting chain-link gate. Barbed wire barely hanging on. Signs that warned of radiation but were too faded to be scary. We climbed through a break in the fence, walked through a tunnel slick with moss, and found a rusted metal door half covered in rockfall. Fallon pried it open with a crowbar she'd brought in the trunk. Inside, pitch black. But it wasn't empty. It took 30 minutes to find the chamber. Everything about it felt wrong, like we were moving through something meant to stay forgotten. Old lights flickered weakly as the generator kicked to life. Dust fell from the ceiling in little drips, like the place was exhaling after years of holding its breath. Then we found it. A room with glass walls. A chair bolted to the floor. A desk. A bank of dead monitors. And one cabinet. Inside the cabinet was a file. Thick. Labeled Nolan Kessler, active stage/stasis adaptive branch. I read every word. I was part of a resilient cognitive monitoring program launched during a Cold War spillover initiative. I had been implanted, not with a device, but with a life. Constructed. Modeled. Controlled. Every major relationship I'd had since age 14 had been tracked. Dana was introduced in college via a dating app that never actually existed. Her job, her identity, even her parents, all fake. But here's the twist. It wasn't meant to break me. It was meant to protect me. According to the file, I carried a genetically dormant cognitive trait that, under emotional stress, could cause something they called sequential override reflex. Basically, if triggered, I'd start accessing other people's memories. Stored, subconscious experiences. From people I'd never met. They'd observed it once. I described a military extraction in Serbia when I was 7 years old, word for word matching classified footage. I wasn't a spy. I was a receiver. I wasn't meant to be erased. I was meant to be preserved. The betrayal wasn't in what they did. It was in what they didn't do. They didn't tell me who I was. They didn't trust I'd survive the truth. Fallon stood quietly as I closed the file. She watched me like someone watches a storm roll out to sea. Then she handed me the final item, an old analog tape recorder. Already cued to play. I pressed the button and heard my father's voice. If you're hearing this, then the walls have finally broken. And you've survived what we didn't think you could. You've always been stronger than the system we put you in. And for that, I'm sorry. Pause. Static. You're not a weapon. You're a witness. And the people who feared you the most, they're gone now. The only one left to decide what happens next is you. Click. Silence. For the first time in months, no lies. No noise. Just truth. I burned the file. Right there. Watched the pages curl and blacken and turn to flakes. Fallon didn't stop me. She only said one thing before we walked back into the morning light. You know who you are now. That means you're free. And I believed her. We disappeared after that. I changed my name. Started over in a quiet, nameless town. No more cameras. No more monitoring. Dana never came back, and I never looked for her. I figured she'd been given a new assignment. Or maybe, just maybe, she'd finally quit the machine too. Fallon and I spoke once more, 6 months later. A postcard. No return address. 3 words only. You made it. And you know what? I did. My name is Nolan. Or at least